And now, Andrew Does Everything proudly presents Holes. Inspired by Andrew's mother. That's me. Chapter 1. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There once was a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That's where I was born. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry and flattened wasteland. There used to be a town of Green Lake as well. The town shriveled and dried up along with the lake and the people who lived there. During the summertime, the daytime temperatures hovers around 95 degrees in the shade. If you can find any shade, there's not much shade and a big dry lake. The only trees are 2 old oaks on the eastern edge of the lake. A hammock is stretched between the 2 trees and a log cabin stands behind it. The campers are forbidden to lie on the hammock. It belongs to the warden. The warden owns the shade. Out on the lake, rattlesnakes and scorpions find shade under rocks and in the holes dug by the campers. Here's a good rule to remember about rattlesnakes and scorpions. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. Usually, be bitten by a scorpion or even a rattlesnake is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You won't die. Usually, sometimes a camper will try to get bitten, be bitten by a scorpion or even a small rattlesnake. Then he will get to spend a day or 2 recovering instead of having to dig a hole out on the lake. But you don't want to be bitten by a yellow-spotted lizard. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You will die a slow and painful death. Always, if you get bitten by a yellow-spotted lizard, you might as well go into the shade of the oak trees and lie in them. There's nothing anyone can do to you anymore. I hope you enjoyed this story, Andrew's Doers. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and Andrew Does Everything. Buy our merchandise at AndrewDoesEverything.com. Take care. Bye. Andrew's Doers, welcome to Holes Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The reader is probably asking, why would anyone go to Camp Green Lake? Most campers weren't given a choice. Camp Green Lake is a camp for bad boys. If you take a bad boy and make him dig a hole every day in the hot sun, it will turn him into a good boy. That was what some people thought. Stanley Yelnats was given a choice. The judge said, "You may go to jail or you may go to Camp Green Lake." Stanley was from a poor family. He had never been to camp before. And wait, there's 3 here. Chapter 3. Stanley Yelnats was the only passenger on the bus. Not counting the driver or the guard. The guard was sat next to the driver with his seat. Turned around facing Stanley. A rifle rail was across his lap. Stanley was sitting about 10 rows back, handcuffed to his armrest. His backpack lay on the seat next to him. It contained his toothbrush, toothpaste, and a box full of stationery his mother had given him. He promised to write to her at least once a week. He looked out the window, although there wasn't much to see, mostly fields of hay and cotton. He was on a long bus ride to nowhere. The bus wasn't air conditioned, and the hot every air was almost as stifling as the handcuffs. Stanley and his parents had tried to pretend that he was just going away for a canto for a while, just like rich kids do. When Stanley was younger, he used to play with stuffed animals and pretend the animals were a camp. Camp fun games, he called it. Sometimes he had them to play soccer with a marble. Other times they run in obstacles or bungee jumping or off a table tied to broken rubber bands. Now Stanley tried to pretend he was going to camp fun games. Maybe he'd make some friends, he thought, and he'd get to go swimming in the lake. He didn't have any friends at home. He was overweight, and the kids at his middle school often teased him about his size. Even his teacher made sometimes make cruel comments without realizing it. On his last day of school, his math teacher, Mrs. Bell, taught ratios. As an example, she chose the heaviest kid in the class and the lightest kid in the class and had them weigh themselves. Stanley lay 3 times as much as the older boy. Mrs. Bell wrote ratio on the board. 3 to 1. I wonder how much embarrassment she had caused both of them. Stanley was arrested. Later that day, he looked at the guard who had slumped in his seat and wondering if he had fallen asleep. The guard was wearing sunglasses, so Stanley couldn't see his eyes. Stan was not a bad kid. He was innocent of the crime for which he was convicted. Just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was all because of his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. He smiled. It was a family joke. Whenever anything went wrong, they always blamed Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. Supposedly, he had a great-great-grandfather who had stolen a pig from a one-legged gypsy, and she put a curse on him and all his descendants. Stanley's parents didn't believe in the curses, of course, but whenever anything went wrong, it felt good to be blamed someone. Pigs let him wrong a lot. They always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He looked out the window at a vast emptiness. He watched the rest of the film on a telephone wire. In his mind, he could hear his father's gruff voice softly singing. If only only the woodpecker sighs, the bark of the tree was a little bit softer, though all the walls hung lightly. He cries to the moon. If only, if only. It was a song his father used to sing to him. The melody was sweet and sad, but Stanley's favorite part was when father would howl at the word moon. The bus had a small bun, and the guard set up, instantly alert. Stanley's father was an inventor. To be a successful inventor, you need 3 things: intelligence, perseverance, and just a little bit of luck. Stanley's father was smart and had a lot of perseverance. When he started a project, he would work on it for years, often going days without sleep. He never just had any luck. Every experiment, Stanley could hear him cursing his dirty, rotten pig, stealing great-great-grandfather. Stanley's father was also named Stanley Yelnats. Stanley's father full name was Stanley Yelnats II. Our Stanley was Stanley Yelnats IV. Everyone in his family had always liked the fact that Stanley Yelnats was spelled the same way, frontward or backward. So they kept naming their son Stanley. Stanley was the only child, as every other Stanley yelled at. Well, for him, all of them had always been common. Despite their awful lot, they always remained hopeful. As Stanley's father liked to say, I learned from failure. But perhaps that the part of the curse was as well. And Stanley and his father weren't always hopeful. Then it wouldn't hurt so much every time their hopes were crushed. Not every Stanley Yelnats has been a failure. This is not have nothing to point out. Whenever Stanley and his father became so discouraged that they actually started to believe in the curse. The first Stanley Yelnats, Stanley's great-grandfather, had made a fortune in the cotton market. He couldn't have been too unlucky. At such times he neglected to mention the bad lines before the bell. Stanley Yelnats. He lost an entire fortune when he was moving away to New York. To California, his stagecoach was robbed by the outlaw Kissing Kate Barlow. If it weren't for that, Stanley's family would now be living in a mansion on the beach in California. Instead, they crammed into a tiny apartment that smelled of burning rubber and foot odor. If only. The apartment smelled the way it did because Stanley's father was trying to invent to recycle old sneakers. The first person who finds a use for old sneakers, he said, will be a very rich man. It was the latest project relates to Stanley's arrest. The bus rider became increasingly bummy because the road was no longer paved. Actually, Stanley had been impressed when he first found out that his great-grandfather was murdered by Kissing Kate Barlow. True. No, he would have preferred living on the beach in California, but was still kind of fool. Someone had robbed by a famous outlaw. Kate Barlow didn't actually kiss Stanley's great-grandfather. That would have been really cool, but she only kissed the man she killed. Instead, she robbed them and left them stranded in the middle of the desert. He was lucky to have survived, Stanley's mother was quick to point out. The bus was slowing down. The guard grunted as he stretched his arm. Welcome to Camp Green Lake, said the driver. Stanley looked at the dirty river, and he couldn't see a lake, and hardly anything was green. And if you want to see Chapter 4, tell your friends about it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and introduce everything. Buy our merchandise at introduceeverything.com. Take care. Bye. And now, Introduce Everything proudly presents Paul's Chapters 4 to 6. Chapter 4. Stanley felt somewhat dazed as the guard unlocked his handcuffs and led him off the bus. He'd been on the bus for over 8 hours. Be careful, the bus driver said as Stanley walked down the steps. Stanley wasn't sure the bus driver meant for him to be careful going down the steps, or if that he was telling him to be careful at Camp Green Lake. Thanks for the ride, he said. His mouth was dry and his throat hurt. There was a band of sweat around his face where the handcuff had been. The land was barren and desolate. He could see a few run-down buildings and some tents. Farther away, there was a cabin between 2 tall trees. Those 2 trees were the only plant life he could see. There weren't even weeds. The guard led Stanley to a small building. A sign out front said, "You are entering Ken Green Lake Juvenile Correctional Facility." Next to it was another sign which declared that it was a violation of Texas Penal Code to bring guns, explosive weapons, drugs, or alcohol onto the premises. As Stanley read the sign, he couldn't help but think, "Well, duh!" The guard led Stanley, into the building where he felt the welcoming relief of air conditioning. A man was sitting with his feet up on a desk. He turned his head when Stanley and the guard entered, but otherwise didn't move, even though he was inside. He wore glasses and a cowboy hat. He also held a can of soda, and the sight of it made Stanley even more aware of his own thirst. He waited while the bus guard gave the man papers to sign. "That's a lot of sunflower seeds," the bus guard said. Stanley noticed a burlap sack filled with sunflower seeds on the floor next to the desk. "I quit smoking last month," said the man in the cowboy hat. He had a tattoo of a rattlesnake on his arm. And as he said his name, the snake's rattle seems to wiggle. "I used to smoke a pack a day. Now I eat a sack of these every week." The girl laughed. There must have been a small refrigerator behind his desk, because the man in the cowboy hat had produced 2 more cans of soda to make 3. For a second, Stanley thought that one might be for him, but the man gave him one to the guard and said the other was for the driver. 9 hours here and 9 hours back, the guard grumbled. What a day! Stanley thought about the long, miserable bus ride. I feel a little sorry for the guard and the bus driver. The man in the cowboy hat spit sunflower seed shells into a waste paper basket. Then he walked around to Mr. Stanley. Stanley. "My name is Mr. Sir," he said. "Whenever you speak to me, you must call me by my name. Is that clear?" Stanley hesitated. Yes, Mr. Sir," he said, though he couldn't imagine that was really the man's name. "You are not in the Girl Scouts anymore," Mr. Sir said. Stanley had to remove his clothes in front of Mr. Sir, who made sure he wasn't hiding anything. He was then given 2 sets of clothes and a towel, each set consisting of a long-sleeved orange jumpsuit, an orange and an orange t-shirt and yellow socks. Stanley wasn't sure if the socks had been yellow originally. He was also given white sneakers, an orange cap, and a canteen made of heavy plastic, which unfortunately was empty. The cap had a piece of cloth sewn on the back of it for neck protection. Stanley got dressed. The clothes smelled like soap. Mr. Sir told him that he should wear one set to work in and one set for relaxation. Laundry was done every 3 days. On the day, his work clothes would be washed. Then the other set would become his work clothes, and then he would get clean on his work to while resting. You are to dig 1 hole each day, including Saturdays and Sundays. Each hole must be 5 feet deep and 5 feet across in every direction. Your shovel is your measuring stick. Breakfast is served at 4:30. Stanley must have looked surprised when Mr. Sir went on to explain that they started early to avoid the hottest part of the day. No one is going to babysit you, he added. The longer it takes you to dig, the longer you will be out of the sight. If you dig up anything interesting, you are to report it to me or any other counselor. When you finish, the rest of the day is yours. Stanley nodded to show he understood. This isn't a Girl Scout camp, said Mr. Sir. He checked Stanley's bag and allowed it to keep it. Then he led Stanley outside into the blazing heat. Take a good look around you, Mr. Sir said. What do you see? Stanley looked out in the vast wastelands. There seemed thick with heat and dirt. Not much, he said. He hastily added, Mr. Sir laughed. Any guard towers, no. How about electric fans? No, Mr. Sir. There's no fence at all, is there? No, Mr. Sir. You want to run away? Mr. Sir asked him. Stanley looked back to him, unsure what he meant. If you want to run away, go ahead. Start running. I am not going to stop you. Stanley didn't know what kind of game Mr. Sir was playing. I see you're looking at my gun. Don't worry, I'm not going to shoot you. He tapped his holster. This is for yellow spotted eyes. I wouldn't waste a bullet on you. I am not going to run away, Stanley said. Good thinking, said Mr. Sir. Nobody runs away from here. We don't need a fence. You know why? Because we've only got the water for 100 miles. You want to run away? You'll be buzzer food in 3 days. Stanley could see some kids dressed in orange. Herschel was dragging them towards the tents. You're thirsty? Asked Mr. Sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Sir said. Stan said gratefully. Well, you better get used to it. You're going to be thirsty for the next 18 months. Chapter 5. There were 6 large gray tents, and each one had a black letter on it, A, B, C, D, E, or F. The first 5 tents were for the campers. The counselors sleep in F. Stanley was assigned to D tent. Mr. Pedanski was his counselor. My name is easy to remember, said Mr. Pedanski as he shook hands with Stanley just outside the tent. 3 easy words. Pedanski. Mr. stirred to return to the office. Mr. Pedanski was younger than Mr. Sir, and not as nearly as scary as looking. The top of his head he was shaved so close he was bald, but his face was covered in a thick curly black beard. His nose was badly sunburned. Mr. Stern isn't really so bad, said Mr. Pedanski. He's just been in a bad mood ever since he quit smoking. The person you've got to worry is about the warden. There's really only one rule at Camp Green Lake. Don't upset the warden. Stanley nodded as if he understood. I want to know, Stanley, that I respect you. Mr. Pedanski said, I understand you've made some bad mistakes in your life. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But everyone makes mistakes. You may have done some bad things, but that doesn't mean you're a bad kid. Stanley nodded. It seemed pointless to try and tell his counselor that he was innocent. He figured that everyone probably said that. He didn't want Mr. Pendanski to think he had a bad attitude. I'm going to help you turn your life around, said his counselor. But you're going to have help too. Can I count on your help? Yes, sir, said Stanley. Mr. Pendanski said good and patted Stanley on the back. Two boys, each carrying a shovel, were coming across the compound. Mr. Pendanski called them, Rex, Allen, I want you to go and say hello to Stanley. He's the new member of our team. The boys glanced wearing at Stanley. They were dripping in sweat. Their faces were so dirty that it took Stanley a moment to notice that one kid is white and the other was black. What happened to Barbag? Asked the black kid. Lewis was still in the hospital, said Mr. Pendanski. He won't be returning, he told the boys to come, shake Stanley's hand, and introduce himself like gentlemen. Hi, said the white kid grunted. That's Alan, said Mr. Pendanski. My name's not Alan, said the boy. It's Squid, and that's X-Ray. Hey, said X-Ray. He smiled and shook Stanley's hand. He wore glasses, but they were so dirty that Stanley wondered how he could see out of them. Mr. Pendanski told Alan to go to the rec hall, bring the other boys to meet Stanley. Then he led them inside the tent. There were 7 cots, and each one was less than 2 feet from the next to it, which was Lewis's cot. Mr. Pendanski, Barbag slept here, said X-Ray, kicking out one of the beds. All right, Stanley, that'll be yours, said Mr. Pendanski, and looked at the cot and nodded. He wasn't particularly thrilled about sleeping in the same cot that had been used to be by somebody named Barbag. 7 crates were stacked in 2 piles at one side of the tent. The open end of the crates faced outward. Stanley put on his pack like changing clothes and towel. It used to be one inside, in Barbag's crate. It was at the bottom of the stack that the free ended. Skid would turn with 4 other boys. The first 3 were introduced by Mr. Pendanski as Jose, Theodore, and Ricky. They called themselves Magnet, Arpat, and Zigzag. They all had nicknames, explained Mr. Pendanski. However, I prefer to use the parents to the names their friends gave them. The names that society will recognize them by when they return to become useful and hard-working members of society. It ain't just a nickname, X-Ray told Mr. Pendanski. He tapped the rim of his glasses. I can see you inside, your mom. You've got a big bad heart. The last boy either didn't have a real name or else he didn't have a nickname. So both Mr. Pendanski and X-Ray called him Zero. You know why his name's Zero? Asked Mr. Pendanski. Because there's nothing inside his head. He smiled playfully, so shook Zero's shoulder. Zero said nothing. And that's Mom, a boy said. Mr. Pendanski smiled at him. If that makes you feel better to call me Ma, Theodore, go ahead and call me Ma. He turned to Stanley. If you have questions, Theodore will help you. You got that, Theodore? And depending on you, Theodore spit a thin ice of lime between his teeth, causing some of the other boys to complain about the need to keep their home sanitary. You were all Herbert wants. said Mr. Pendanski, and you all know what it feels like. Accounting every one of you stand to help Stanley. Stanley at the ground. Mr. Pendanski left the tent, and soon the other boys began to file out as well, taking their towels and changing clothes with them. Stanley was relieved to be left alone, but he was so thirsty he felt as he would die if he didn't get to drink so. Hey, Theodore, he said going after him. Do you know where I can fill my canteen? Theodore whirled and growled, standing by his gobble. My name's not Theodore, he said. It's Arpit. He threw Stanley to the ground. Stanley stared at him, terrified. There was a water spigot on the wall on the shower stall. Thanks, Arpit, said Stanley as he watched the boy turn and walk away. He couldn't for the life of him figure out why anyone would call him Arpit. In a way, it made him feel a little better to have to sleep in a cot that had been used by somebody named Barfbag. Maybe it was a term of respect. Chapter 6. Stanley took a shower. If you could call that a dinner, if you could call it that, and went to bed, if you could call it smelly and scorching up bed because of the scarcity of water. Each camper was only around for a 4-minute shower. It took Stanley nearly that long to get to cold water. There was no now for hot water. He kept stepping into and jumping back from the spring until the water shut off automatically. He never managed to use his bar soap, which was just as well. He wouldn't have a time to rinse out the suds. Dinner was kind of a stewed meat and vegetables. The meat was brown and the vegetable had once been green. Everything tastes pretty much the same. He ate it all. And it was one slice of bread to mop out the juice. Stanley had never been once to leave food on his plate, no matter what. How he tasted it. What'd you do? One of them asked Cameron. Said, asked him. At first, Stanley didn't know what he meant. They sent you a reason. They sent you here for a reason. Oh, he realized I stole a pair of sneakers. The other boys thought he was funny. Stanley wasn't sure why. Maybe because the crimes were a lot worse than stealing shoes from a storm, or were they also on someone's feet? Asked Squid. Neither, Stanley said. They belonged to Clive Livingston. Nobody believed him. Sweetie? Said Asks. Yeah, right. No way, said Squid. Now, as Stanley lay on his cot, he thought it was a kind of a funny way, in a way. Nobody had believed him that he said he was innocent. Now, when he said he stole him, nobody believed him either. Clyde Sweevy Livingston was a famous baseball player. He led the American League in stolen bases for the over last 3 years. He was the only player in history to ever hit 4 triples in a game. Stanley had a poster hang on the wall of his bedroom. He used to have the poster anyway. He didn't know where it was now. He had been taken by the police and used it for evidence of the guilt in the courtroom. Clyde Livingston also came to court, in spite of everything. When Stanley found out that Sweefy was going to be there, he was actually excited for the prospect of meeting his hero. Columbus testified that they were his sneakers and that he had donated them to help raise money for the homeless shelter. He said he couldn't imagine what kind of a horrible person would steal from homeless children. That was the worst part of Stanley. His hero thought he was a no good dirty rotten feet. At Stanley, he tried to turn over his cot. He was afraid he was going to collapse over his weight. When he finally managed to roll over his down, the smell was so bad that he had to turn her over again and tried sleeping on his back. The cot smelled like sour milk. Though it was night, the air was still very warm. Arpa was snoring 2 cots away. Back at school, a bully named Derek Dune used to torment Stanley. The teachers never took Stanley's complaints seriously, but Derek was so much more than Stanley. Some teachers even seemed to find it was amusing that Derek was a little kid, like Derek, but someone as big as Stanley. On the day when Stanley was arrested, Stanley had taken Stanley's notebook, and after a long game of come again, he finally dropped it into the toilet in the boys' restroom. By the time Stanley retrieved it, he had missed his bus and had to walk home. It was a while he was walking out carrying his wet notebook. With the prospect, I'll have to copy the ruined pages. Then his sneakers fell from the sky. I was walking home, and the sneakers fell from the sky. He told the judge, one hit me in the head, and it hurt too. They hadn't exactly fallen from the sky. He had just walked out from a freeway, overpass, when the shoe hit him in the head. Stanley took it as some kind of sign. His father had been trying to figure out a way to recycle his sneakers. Then suddenly a pair of sneakers fell on top of him, sitting out of nowhere, like a gift from a god. Naturally, he had no way of knowing they belonged to Clive Langston. In fact, the shoes were anything but sweet. Whoever had worn them had a bad case of foot odor. Stanley couldn't help but think that there was something special about the shoes, that they would somehow provide the key to his father's invention. It was too much of a coincidence to be a mere accident. Stanley had felt like he was sold Destiny's shoes. He ran, thinking back now that he wasn't sure why he ran. Maybe he was in a hurry to bring back shoes to his owner, or maybe he was trying to run away from his miserable on the day of school. A patrol car pulled alongside. Police asked why was he running. Then he took the shoes and made a call on his radio. Shortly thereafter, Stanley was arrested. It turned out to be the sneakers had been stolen from the display at the homeless shelter. Then even the rich people were going to come to the shelter and pay $100 to eat the food that the poor people had eaten every day for free. Clive Livingston, who had once lived at the shelter when he was younger, was going to speak, sign autographs. The shoes were auctioned, and it was expected that they were sell for over $5,000. All the money would go to help the homeless. Because of the baseball schedule, Stanley trial was delayed several months. His parents couldn't afford a lawyer. You don't need a lawyer, his mother had said. Just tell the truth. Stanley told the truth. But perhaps it would have been better if he had lied a little. He could have said he found the shoes in the street. No one believed that they fell from the sky. It wasn't destiny, he realized. It was his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. The judge called Stanley's crime despicable. The shoes were valued at over $5,000. It was money that would provide food and shelter for the homeless, and you stole that from them just so you could have a souvenir. The judge said that there was an opening at Camp Green Lake, and he suggested that the discipline of the camp might have been a mysterious character. It was either that or jail. Stanley's parents asked if they could have some time to find out more about Camp Green Lake, but the judge advised us to make a quick decision. Vacancies don't last as long at Camp Green Lake. I hope you enjoyed this story, Andrews Doers. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share on Internet Knows Everything, and buy your merchandise at internetknowseverything.com. And holds chapter 7 to 10. Maybe. Take care, Andrews Doers. Bye.